Welcome to the Tall Corn Book Talk. I'm Nick Bergus, the books columnist for the Iowan magazine. And with me, of course, as always, is Steve Semken of Ice Cube Press. How you doing today, Steve?
Not bad. It's a good day for words.
Good day for words. So let's talk about some recommendations that you brought in, and I've got a couple of myself.
All right. Well, as we go into summer, everybody's got their summer reading list, right?
Yeah.
Summer, I heard someone else say summer reading. Forget about the E and the R, just go with the A, summer. So I brought a couple in. One, The Great Gatsby. I've been hearing about the movie trailer that's coming out.
Yeah.
So I thought you can't go wrong with The Great Gatsby. And I've read it numerous times, but it's good summer reading, colorful language. Go visit the eggs. And then apparently there's a new book coming out on Richard Brautigan.
Okay.
And someone else clipped me and said, that's a lot of watermelon sugar, 284 pages of Richard Brautigan. But I think that in Watermelon Sugar, fantastic, quick summer reading book. You won't probably find it with this cool blue cover anymore. But it's still the same old words in Watermelon Sugar. Our lives were lived.
Great. Let me make, before we move on to some more of yours, let me make a couple more recommendations. Okay. You mentioned summer. A couple books, they're kids' books. Okay. And I'm a fan of kids' books. I love reading books with my daughter. So one that my mother read to me and I read with my daughter is called Half Magic by Edward Eager. It's about a bunch of kids with nothing to do during summer, and they find this magic talisman and they sort of go on adventures. And the trick with this is that you only get half of what you wished for. So there's sort of the comedic value there. Right. And another one, which is actually a newer book by Laurel Snyder, which is called Any Which Wall. It actually sort of features sort of Iowa City-like environs. It's about some kids in summer, a very similar sort of style, where they find a wall in the middle of the cornfield that takes them to any wall that they wish to. And so it's sort of that kids' ordinary magic adventure kind of story. And they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love books like that.
Yeah. So what else do you have for us?
Boy, my books are really hardcore now compared to those fun sounding ones. Well, I don't know why I was thinking of this one today, but it's this thing called Soulcraft. Okay. And it's I just think of summertime, a lot of the times people will kind of reevaluate what they want to do in the fall or their lives or something. This is a really cool, the title is Soulcraft, Crossing into the Mysteries of Nature and Psyche. And it sounds really serious from the title, but it's pretty intense, just a way to look into your life and things you might want to reconsider. And
it sounds really heavy.
It is pretty heavy. The book itself is pretty big, too. But then I'm just going to run through a few upcoming Ice Cube Press titles. I actually have plugs today for events and stuff.
Oh,
we'll
fantastic.
Save that, tell our guest at the very end. I wanted to mention The Divorce Girl, which is coming out this summer, July 7th. And it's a real captivating story about love and art and divorce. And you think you know divorce until you read this book, or a lot of people, I think, go into they think that they know what divorce really is, but it's not really what you think it is most of the time. This one is coming out in the fall. It's a young adult reader, and this says Uncorrected Galley on the front, but I like to get my marketing started early. And so this is a young adult one on the orphan trains in Iowa. And then The Adventures of These Three Kids, and it's called For the Love of Pete by Ethel Barker.
So is this like a historical fiction? Yeah,
historical fiction by a local Iowa City author who I met at the Iowa City Book Fair. And this is a really, really tiny book that I just met this guy in the Quad Cities, and I really love the way his poetry sounds. He does readings for the Bucktown Review, and he's just got real nature-oriented poetry that just has he figures out the key between sounds and actions. It's called Mortals, Nature, and Their Souls by Sal Marisi. That concludes my summer reading.
All right, so we are going to, you want to talk real quickly about Love and Other Delusions?
Yeah. We got our guest today is Larry Baker, novelist Larry Baker.
Yeah.
And this is his new book called Love and Other Delusions. We just love the cover. It's blue. I love the color blue.
It also has a naked woman on it.
My shirt too. It does have a naked woman on it. But you have to read the book to find out, or we can ask Larry how in the world that ever happened.
So we are joined by Larry Baker, the author of The Flamingo Rising, and recently Love and Other Delusions, which is on Ice Cube Press. How are you doing today, Larry?
I'm doing very good. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, great. Do you want to, you sort of Love and Other Delusions is described as the story of a married woman's long-term affair with a younger man, an old story with new twists. You want to tell us a little bit about what the book is about? Yeah,
it's about love, sex, and death in that particular order. And it's about obsessive-compulsive passion. And the delusion comes from the idea that this woman thought she could actually make this work, stay married to a husband who loves her, have an affair with a younger man, a much younger man who loves her, she thinks, and everybody would be okay with that. And by the end, what you discover, what the reader discovers is, this woman's just bat crazy. And whether or not the affair drove her crazy, I think they will discover that she was crazy before the affair, and that explains the affair. So I was interested in doing something different. A lot of my other books you can teach in high school, parents love them. Hallmark did a movie of my first book. Hallmark will not touch this book, not at all.
Not a Hallmark story.
No, no.
Yeah, what's the card you get for somebody when they stay married but then have an affair? Do they make that card?
Hallmark doesn't, but I think, what is that? There's another cartoon card company that does American Card or something. I've actually sent it to a few people I know.
You open it up and stuff flies out.
Yeah.
So where does sort of the idea for a story like that come from?
Well, I was going to say like Law and Order, ripped from today's headlines. You're always hearing these stories, reading stories about, especially teachers who will have these trysts with high school students. And to me, that's just sort of creepy. I mean, there's nothing literary about that I want to write about. But I did remember seeing a few years ago an interview with that most famous high school teacher, Mary Lou Retino, or whatever her name was, Letourneau, Mary Kay Letourneau, who had the affair with a 12-year-old boy. And this was done after she'd gotten out of prison for the second time, after she had borne this young man 2 children, and they were married. And you just watch her in this interview and you realize she's utterly delusional. And I thought, there's a hook in there somewhere. I just couldn't write that kind of story, so I wrote it with a woman in college who the young man is 18 when she meets him, and they don't really consummate this for 2 years because she resists this urge that she has. But when she finally falls off that cliff, it is a very long and hard fall. And it's a much more adult book than anything I've ever written. I mean, I was going to tell Steve this. In September, I'm doing a reading at the Haunted Bookshop, and I'm just going to read the sex scenes. And we're not going to allow children. We're not even allow taping. This will not be reproduced in any other form. You have to be there to hear this. But I'm going to read every sex scene I ever wrote, and this one will, from this book, will end the evening, and people will go screaming from the bookstore, or salivating.
So it seems like you have to walk a fine line. Like if you're writing a sex scene and you're trying to, be serious about it, not write some sort of romance novel. Like how do you walk that line? Because it seems like it might very easily fall into. Sort of. Yeah.
Would you like me to read it out loud today? I mean,
we'll avoid reading it. But how do you walk that line?
Okay. I did the same thing in my first book, Flamingo Rising, which Hallmark did do a movie of, but Hallmark took that story, and where these kids are teenagers when they're having sex, they stopped the story at the age of 12, so there's no sex at all. But even then, I wrote that scene without using body parts. That's one of the first things you can do. What you're trying to describe is the sensation of the event, the feeling, the sort of sensory, the touch, taste, smell. But you don't need body parts for that.
Sure.
This one is a little bit different because these are an adult relationship by this time, and it is not love, it is passion. And so you only reveal a certain amount. Something very simple. In the first sex scene of this book, they keep their clothes on. So the bodies aren't even revealed to each other. But it's very clear that when she goes into the teacher's lounge at midnight with this guy and proceeds to have him lay down on the couch and ABC follows, This is a much more graphic scene than anything I've done before. But I think people will find it, I want people to be stimulated and almost like voyeuristically. You're watching this from a distance and you don't get to see everything. It's like through a window pane you get to see this particular act. So it's difficult to do, but we'll see. I mean, everybody who has read it, in fact, I had 12 women read that scene a year ago before the book was finished to get their response. And 11 of the 12 wanted to read more. And the 12th just thought I needed therapy.
That's right.
And you know what? They could both be right.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah.
Oh, they could both be right?
They could all be right. So, this book, Steve published this book. You mentioned The Flamingo Rising. That was published by a major publisher. What's the difference in working with a larger publisher and a smaller publisher?
The amount of input you have. Steve has worked with me on covers, font design, chapter headings, number of copies. It is working with Steve is working with your book, not letting somebody else just take it and here it is and this is what you're going to do and you can go on this tour if you want to, but we'll take care of everything. Now, there's a lot of advantages to that, of course. They spend a lot of money promoting and sending around. Steve and I have worked together on 2 books now, and we've gotten a lot of coverage, and I've been very, very happy with, if not, in particular, the physical product, the book itself. This book and A Good Man, the previous book, are great looking books. I mean, you leaf through A Good Man, just look at the way the chapter headings are set up, look at the font, look at the type of periods. I mean, Steve pointed out something to me. If you get a microscope or a reading glass and look at the lines, each period is not a dot. It's a different it's a star.
All stars.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's surprising how often you talk to authors just at events, or authors that I work with, or authors at other publishers, and they're actually, I mean, to me it makes perfect sense that I would want the author to like their book, because if you don't have a lot of money to put into marketing, the last thing you want is Larry to pick up his book, get it that day and look at it and then throw it on the ground in disgust. I mean, to me it makes perfect sense that I would work with them, but yet that always surprises people for some reason. I don't really know why it does.
No, I was astonished that this big publisher for my first book came up with a very bad cover. I mean, I found out from bookstore owners later, we don't like this cover. And yet they had a great cover. And they showed it to me, and I said, I want that cover. They showed it to Barnes & Noble. They showed it to some other chain stores, and they didn't like it. And so it became sort of cover by committee, and it was not an effective cover. This one, I think, is a great cover.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk just about the covers. This For Love and Other Delusions, this was photographed locally.
Photographed
right?
at the Coralville Center for the Performing Arts.
Okay. Were you present when it was being photographed?
Are you kidding? I'm the author. I'm the director. I hired a photographer. I mean, Steve just let me have free reign. I hired a photographer. I got a lighting technician. I got permission from the Coralville Center for the Performing Arts. We spent 2 hours with a model, a real human being. This is not Photoshop. That's a real person. We took 180 different pictures. And at the end, what we ended up doing is taking 3 different photographs and then putting them together. Like the seats in this picture are from a completely different picture that was taken as opposed to the blue background. But it sort of gives you that sense of falling into the image. And here's your first clue, spoiler alert. This represents the last chapter of the book. This event occurs in the last chapter of the book. And I can tell you that, and it's not going to spoil anything for you, but this woman ends up naked on stage in a movie theater, in the center of her own drama. And we had an original cover that was sent out for all the review copies, which was a picture of a restaurant, which is another scene in the book. And that just didn't work for some reason. And another thing working with Steve, you want to change it? Let's change it. Make it where you're happy with it.
Right.
And we changed it at the last minute, And that picture that was the cover art is now inside the book, inside the chapter where it appears. So this is the sort of stuff that when you walk by on a bookshelf, this is a cover that's going to get your attention.
And so I assume that you really had very little input on other covers for like the Flamingo Rising.
No. The Flamingo was completely out of my control. Everything was out of my control in Flamingo. The other book that I did with Steve, A Good Man, which if you show the cover of this, if you splice in the picture of that cover is great. That's an old photograph that I used as a memory for one of the characters, but it's actually a picture of me and my son 30 years ago, 25 years ago on the beach somewhere. And so that cover works in a completely different way than this one does. This one is supposed to be very sexual, whereas the other cover and the book is about fatherhood and parental relationships. It's very different. So Steve is able to work with writers about this. And I do want to say, you just ignore all of Steve's recommendations for the summer until after you have finished reading this book, because it's short. Get it real quick.
Well, I would obviously add Love and Other Delusions to my summer reading list. But it's, I figure we'd get to that point.
It's me or The Great Gatsby. I mean, take your pick.
You'd have time to read them both.
Absolutely. So, I mean, when you were working with authors on their books, I mean, clearly their input is important, and how do you work with them to get a cover that they're happy with? Besides just saying, go hire a model and take pictures.
Yeah. Well, sometimes being so lenient, I sometimes wish I wasn't so lenient, because it does take some time to get people to agree. Because a lot of times I'll have one in mind, and that's usually how it starts. Larry happens to know the kind of book that he wants and how he wants it to look. And a lot of people don't really have that visual ability to come to me and say, oh, I know what I want my cover to look like. And in some ways, focusing on covers is sort of the bane of the writer, if you ask me, because in some ways it has nothing to do with whether the book is good or not, but these days everyone wants to see a really awesome book cover in order to then read the words. The other day I was thinking to myself, why can't we just go back to just putting the words on blue? And that would be it. And then we wouldn't have all this cover design and everything. The words would be there. But I know that's not a reality. So a lot of the times I'll come up with the cover for someone just to get things rolling, because if they say they don't have any idea, or I'll say, what's another book that you like that you think is similar to the book you've written, and then we can kind of design something that I think the author will like. And I usually only focus on what they'll like. I don't really think about, I don't go to the bookstore and check out that section and see what covers have been used and what haven't been used, which is a good technique, but I just don't do that.
Sure.
And so some of the given, I really worry about the inside first, though. I don't think that we ever start out with the cover on anybody's, because I guess I'm into the words more than the cover.
That makes sense.
Right.
And it seems to me that one of the big differences is, we talked about sort of marketing of books, and now you are going on a tour, a small tour, I assume, to promote this book, correct?
Well, my first reading was at Prairie Lights here in Iowa City a couple of weeks ago, but I'll be down in Fairfield, Iowa on June the 9th at a Revelations bookstore, and then I'm going up to Milwaukee to the Next Chapter bookstore. It's a great independent bookstore, and then they've been very helpful across the country. So I'll do Milwaukee on June the 15th at Next Chapter, and then I come back to Des Moines on the 18th and do the Des Moines Public Library as part of their Authors Visiting in Des Moines series. And then I'm going to Omaha to the Bookworm bookstore, which is a great independent bookstore. And then the Marion Public Library, and I'm doing a Florida book festivals. This book is set in Florida, so I have a natural audience down there, and my other books are set in Florida. And I just got word today, and I haven't told Steve, but the Tulsa people are finally coming through, and there's a very good reading series in Tulsa, which I'll be doing in the fall. And then with that, I will coordinate, and I'll end up doing tours in Texas as well. I'll do about 4 different cities in 3 days, but I had to get Tulsa set up because they actually pay expenses, and I'll work around their schedule.
And
so it's all part of me having to go out there and make contacts. Steve is the publisher. Steve will do a lot of the work. But basically, unless an author at this level can make contacts and promote himself, you will disappear very quickly.
And all of these dates are available, they're all on the website, correct?
Yeah.
On icecubepress.com. Great.
Which is another thing. I tell people, go to the website to buy this book.
Yeah.
Don't go to the Death Star. We won't name the big A word, but go to Ice Tea Books or Ice Cube Press and buy directly from Steve, and it helps both of us out. I mean, the commissions are much higher. I mean, basically, once you buy on
the service is
Amazon,
great.
we're getting
Yeah.
we're getting pennies back.
Yeah. Now, is yours available as an ebook?
It is available on ebook, and you do have to go
Yes.
to Amazon for that. If you come to my house, I'll read parts of it to you. That will cost you a lot, though.
You should start doing it like
But it
the
is
Bat
available
Light
on
at night.
ebook, and it's not my favorite, but people seem to like them.
Steve has come around to
Yeah, I know.
ebooks. We've gone over this for
How
at least the
embarrassing
past
is
year.
It's the necessary evil. I mean, you eventually they'll be selling. They're close now, selling more ebooks than print books. And
Yeah,
We'll
they're
see.
still not so great. No, just kidding, Amazon. But I just thought we should start putting like some lights up in the sky every night, some words. The Bat Light. We could do the Love and Other Delusions light at night.
What's that
a
woman
couple
who's
words
now
every night.
tweeting her new story?
Yeah, Jennifer Egan is
Yeah.
going to do her whole story.
Which, Lord love her,
140 words a second.
140 something words a day, whatever. It's a gimmick that just less said the better.
How far have I come? I'm going to do Larry's book as a Twitter book. No, I'm not, but I actually did start doing Twitter. So you can. We're gonna do plugs at the end, right?
You can plug it now.
Oh well.
Steve is very tech savvy. You can tell.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
We've had a lot of conversations about his tech savviness.
My tech savviness involves 57 questions ahead of time, and that's like, I might be ready now. But at Ice Cube Press is my Twitter handle. Is that what I call it?
You can call it your
Is that
Twitter
your
handle.
hashtag?
I've been twitting there. Wait, I've been tweeting,
Yeah.
twittering, hoot-sweeting, and hashtagging, and
See, you got all the
trying to
lingo.
trend.
You got
but
all
I
the-
haven't trended yet.
Well, you'll get there.
Random House is starting to worry.
Oh, I
should.
did want to mention.
Yeah.
I think when this show, I think the Iowa City Book Fest will be coming up. at
Forgot
some
all
point.
about
July.
that.
And so in July, Larry and I are both part of that. He's one of the key invited authors this year.
Oh,
And
Do you get to go to the
mega.
dinner and everything?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very exciting.
And then I'm a vendor, and then I'm doing a couple panels on writing, and then also on submissions.
Is this the third year
The
for
15th, the 14th, and the 15th
Yeah,
of July.
right in the middle of July, and I forgot
it's
about
the
that
13th,
one.
14th, 15th. Is this the third year
Yeah.
they've done the book fest? Do you know?
It's the I
Third or
think it's
fourth?
the third or fourth year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting pretty. I mean, it gets better every year for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
This year it's going to be up from the library, I think, up by the engineering building instead of the.
And there'll be
University Library.
venues around town as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Blair and I will be doing a panel together on the line between fact and fiction, since we both sort of. He wrote a memoir, which, like all memoirs, you fudge a little bit on memoirs. I write fiction, and people are always asking me, "Well, who's that patient? Is that person real?"
Yeah.
I mean, this book is the most fictional book I've ever read. People say, "Oh, I know somebody just like that." Is that such and such in Iowa City? I said, "No," but if you want to think that, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. People can pretend
So
it's you.
I think that brings up an interesting point. What is your process for I mean, if you're writing fiction, what is your process for sort of getting there?
Oh, I always start with either a character or a situation. The character, this woman's character, delusional, adulterous, but also, and you learn this in the first couple of pages, she's dying. And she's talking to her therapist, and the therapist is trying to get her to come to terms with the fact, whether you think you're two people, one people, whatever, you are dying, and you've got to figure this out. And the book is about her trying to figure out her life. So I start with the character, and then I figured out the situation, which is not the adultery, but the trying to rationalize the adultery. With my other book, with Steve, I started with the idea of writing a new version of Elmer Gantry. I wanted to do about phony preachers. And then I wrote the first chapter, and I changed the whole story because I created a secondary character that became the most appealing character to me, the radio guy. And the preacher became the secondary character. But then the idea of you find a person and put them in a situation, And out of that comes a plot. And very often you think you know where you're going with the plot. I thought I knew where I was going with this, but it changed. I thought I knew where I was going with A Good Man. It changed. Flamingo, I definitely had a plot, and it changed about halfway through when I realized I just created a character who was more in control of the story than I was, which is a writing cliche. You hear writers, oh, the characters help.
It's
They
exciting,
do.
Yeah.
If they're really good, they do sort of
Right.
control their own story after a certain point. So, you know, my next book, I have a situation. I have a woman going to work for the first time in her life at the age of 40. She grew up, she got educated, degrees, married, never had to work, husband drops dead, and she's going back to work at the high school she graduated from. That's a situation that I'm expanding on right now. And I see all sorts of interesting complications from that.
Is it a challenge for you to write female characters as a male?
You know, somebody, I'll name drop here. God, what was his name? Reynolds Price, great writer. Ask him, do you think the women can always write men characters, but can men write female characters? Because how does a man understand a woman? And he says, well, how does a woman understand a man? That you can either write a character or not. I find that when I'm writing this character, it wasn't the fact that she was female, it was that she was crazy that makes her interesting and difficult as a character. But I think really that men and women both, if they have talent, can write both characters. It's not difficult to write a woman as a man, nor is it as a woman difficult to write a man. You just have to have some insight and skill. And saying that, and then
That's the thrill and the challenge of being the author.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the exciting part, is in some ways being surprised as you go along.
one of the first readers on this book was a female bookstore owner in Iowa, and says, you have captured the sort of tension between two women who are trying to tell each other a story, but with, you know, they're judgmental. And I thought I was just writing one female character, but now I've got two great female characters here. So did I say, I could do that? I just wrote it, and it turned out that way. So,
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us
no,
today,
thank you
Larry.
very much, Nick, for having
And
me.
Steve?
again.
All right, well, from the land of tall corn, where it's growing now,
Ah.
read between the corn, I guess.
And thank you for joining us on Tall Corn Book Talk.